Hello and welcome to Make the Logo Bigger. My name is Brenton. This podcast is your gateway into the world of advertising production, crafted especially for those who are stepping in new, aiming to become producers, or simply eager to understand the inner workings of advertising and marketing. We're here to share insights and knowledge you've been looking for, with stories, tips, and real conversations from the pros. We're simplifying the process for everyone with a production curiosity. Whether you're just starting out or keen to explore the production side of ads, you've found the right place. Let's jump in. Today's guest is Victoria Connors, a producer and business owner with over 30 years in advertising production. Vic has had front row seats to how the industry has truly changed, from the shift to digital to the rise of flexible hybrid creatives. We talk about how production roles have evolved, why no but is often the right answer, and how Eric, Tom and Bruce builds jobs with a good, better, best model. There's insight into the questions worth asking up front, the value of collaboration over ego, and why good producers don't just take direction, they ask why, clarify intention, and spot the gaps before they become problems. Victoria also discusses the pressure of high-stakes shoots, the gaps she sees in today's producers, and what it really means to have your crews back when things go wrong. Victoria Connors. Victoria Connors, thank you so much for jumping on. Let me start with 1994. It looks like that's when you started as a producer. Mm-hmm. So then you jump ahead to what, 2025, 31 years. What's the evolution of the industry been like throughout the decades?
Yeah, well, it's been massive. And I've actually just been reflecting on this a lot because this is going to be my 30th year in advertising production. And so much has changed and a few core things have stayed the same. So I think when I started, it was a much more rigid industry. People had their roles and you stuck to your knitting. Camera assistants were camera assistants. Art directors were art directors. No one kind of crossed the lines into other departments, and we were shooting on film. So the stakes, I think, felt a lot higher than they sometimes do now because you had a limited amount of film stock that you could afford in your budget. So you had a limited amount of screen time that you were going to be able to shoot. And definitely when I was like a young production assistant or production manager, the most terrifying thing was when the clapper loader came up and said, we've only got one roll of film left. And you go, oh my God, what are we going to do? Anyway, you used to have all the other production managers around town's numbers so that you could ring and say, does anyone have a roll of this in their stock fridge that I could borrow just in case? So that was like, it was a very different thing. People stayed, like I was a production assistant for like a year before I got to be a production coordinator before. So it was a longer evolution, I think, to producing. And there were more of us who were in production companies. The freelance kind of production world was just starting to kind of get off its feet, really. And so most of us had full-time jobs in production companies and we stayed there I was at the film business where I started for 7 years. So people tended to stay where they were. So all those things were different. The budgets were, for the most part, bigger because people were doing less advertising. There was less areas for you to spend your media money in. So it was mainly going into TV. But we all became pretty skilled because, we were doing the same thing. We were busy all the time, which was great, like really great. And I think now, one of the biggest things I've seen is kind of the whole democratization of production. It was a pretty rigid and challenging path if you wanted to be a director when I was kind of coming up. Whereas now anyone can pick up their phone. We have a lot of more affordable technologies to shoot with. You can shoot 50 takes of the same thing if your heart desires and no one's going to yell at you. So I think that has been a massive change. Like just the number of people that can now be in the industry is just phenomenally different, and the different paths, and also the fact that now we have producer directors, director DOPs, people that work across whole ranges of departments. That never happened, in the old days. And I think the other thing for me is really the number of women who are now in executive roles and senior roles and the number of female directors. Like I literally, when I started, there were 5 working female directors in Australia, and I knew all of them. And it was really hard to find them if you wanted someone who wasn't one of those 5 and you wanted a female director. And they were also pigeonholed. They worked on female kind of stuff. So now I think that's changed. There's a heap more of them. They're all terrific, and they're working on all sorts of brands, which is really exciting. And I think the things that have really stayed the same is kind of how important collaboration is and creativity. Like at the end of the day, that is the core of what we are doing, is collaborating with like-minded people to create really great stuff.
What's it like running your own company? What kind of environment do you like to create for the people that work for you?
Yeah, I think I really like being a values-driven workplace. So I think we're really clear about what our values are around, and some of that is around collaboration and creativity, but it's also about fostering a workplace where we're all unafraid to say yes to something because we know we'll be supported. So that's probably our biggest value is that fearlessness when we say yes to something, because you know that you've got a team that supports you. So I think that team thing is really important. And I think I really want to, a place where we have a lot of respect across the whole gamut of people who are involved in the process. I've definitely worked at places where, the client was the end to the means of getting something for your reel, and I think that's great for some directors because that's what really drives them, is this kind of creative passion. And if they can't do it exactly how they want to do it, they're not going to do it. But I think for a lot of us, we need to bring those clients into the tent, and we need to work, with everyone in a really collaborative way. So that's kind of what I try and instill. And then attention to detail, like every day, attention to detail.
Yes. Well, what's it like for you? Does it come naturally, attention to detail?
A list making comes naturally to me. I'm a natural list maker and a list ticker offerer. So I think if I don't have a list, if I don't have a notepad and pen on my phone, I'm a very lost soul.
I agree, and I have to really work at it to be with detail. I have to lists as well, writing things down and then going over things multiple times. What about you said before about saying yes, that collaborative approach. Now, 2 parts to it. What's it like being a producer? Is it always yes first in your experience, or the way that you've operated?
No. I mean, you would like to say that it is, but it's not, because sometimes people are asking you for things that are just impossible or dangerous or not feasible for their budget. But I think if it's no, but let's think about doing it this way, or no, but let's talk to someone else about a different solution. Yeah, but I don't think you can't be yes at the sake of not doing a good job.
Well, then yes, if you say yes and sacrifice quality, then what's the point?
That's right.
And I guess it's a fine balance as well.
Yeah.
And with the yes, but, and I always look for anecdotes or anything that can kind of give the listeners some sort of way that you may have navigated or approached a no, but. Is there anything that comes to mind, anything over the journey where you go, geez, that was a real good one. Someone wanted something, but no, but, and we figured out a way around that satisfied everybody?
I've been thinking about car jobs a lot today for a few reasons. There are a lot of no buts in cars. So you can't shoot on that road at 10 o'clock in the morning, but maybe we could shoot on this other road that looks kind of the same and you'll have more access to it and then you'll get more time on it or something. I think there's very rarely could I ever, in fact, I can't think of one. There must be one where I've said outright 100% no, we're not doing that. I might have said that and explained why it's impossible to do something, but I've always tried to have come up with myself or talk to the team about what a solution might be. I mean, sometimes it's early on in the job when you're working with a director and they've got some great idea for something and there's no way that you can make that happen for them because it's just budgetarily not, possible. And so, or logistically, like you can't go to China or I don't know, something like that.
Or a
So,
beach, or a nice beach.
or a beach,
open on a beach in
with
Tahiti.
palm trees,
Yeah.
exactly. I wish people would write more of those scripts. Yeah. But I think it's like you have to be open to trying to help to solve the problem. And I think that part of that is in the explanation and how you talk to it. Like, I would never say no without explaining why I'm saying no. Like, I'm saying no because this is going to cost $20,000, and of your budget of $150,000, that is 20%. It's not 20% because of my terrible maths, but it's enough of a chunk for you not to be able to do something else. And I think that you can have this or you can have that is often a good way into those conversations. Like, we have a limited budget. We often hear, Eric, Tom and Bruce, we're not working with those massive budgets. We will often give people a good, better, best version. This is what we can do. This would be a bit better. It's going to cost you this much more money. This is like the bells and whistles option, and it's going to cost you quite a bit more money. You get to choose. So that you're very clear upfront about what is included. But I think it's about that conversation, and it's about being really upfront along the way, like from the director to the agency to the client, whoever, with why you can or can't do something.
And I think that it's a mindset as well where it's not an us and them, it's a we, and we're all rowing in the same direction. And if you can
agree more.
And if you can keep that in mind, it stops that boundary or wall that gets put up.
And I think I couldn't agree more. And having that idea, like sometimes it's going back to why do you want to do that? What is the point of that? What do you want to achieve? Because if you can tell me that, then maybe we can come up with a different way of doing it. I know you've written this in your script, but thing is really expensive or really difficult or like just not possible. But if you tell me why that is written that way, maybe we can come up with a better solution a different solution that's going to work for without those constraints that you've got.
When you know reasons behind something, it opens up the world again for you to understand the perspective, but then also to be like, great, I've got another way that we could probably go about this that you haven't considered.
Yeah, 100%.
So directors, you've worked with probably a lot over the years. What's the new age director like?
I think the new age director, look, there's some through lines with directors. They're passionate, they're storytellers. I think the new age directors are definitely more flexible, for sure, and I think they're definitely a little bit more open to that collaboration. I think one of the things that was different in the olden days, in the film days, was that you had a lot more time in pre-production. The directors and the creatives, for instance, or the clients were spending a lot more time together and building those relationships and building that trust. And, directors had more opportunity to sell through what their visions were. I think now they have to be able to come up with things a lot more quickly. They have to be a lot more flexible. And probably better communicators, really, than they used to have to be. It's so much more competitive that it's not just your reel, though that's hugely important, but it's also your attitude and how you work and how, what people get from that process.
So agencies versus production companies. What's it like being a producer in both? Are there similarities between the two, or are they completely poles apart?
They're not poles apart. They're definitely different though. I suppose so. The first 15 years of my career was in production companies or freelance. And the creative is created in a way when it gets to you. Like there's an outline, you know where you're going. By the time it gets to you, you're in a position where it's approved to some point and it's going to get made. So you're at a much pointier end of the job for sure. And so you're kind of doing a lot more. and you're actually pulling everything together and making everything happen, which is great. I think in the agency, it was a shock to me how much work it just never gets up for a start, and how much time you spend working on things that never end up seeing the light of day. Like really great ideas, which is a little bit demoralizing. But I think my experience in production and then going into an agency was like, I think it was really great benefit to the agency in that I had insight into how different directors worked for a start, and who might work well with a particular script or client that was greater than just their reel. But I also...
Now, a quick word from Advertising Production Academy, a new platform designed to help producers, marketers, and creatives understand how advertising really gets made. From free downloadable templates and rate cards to a 6-week foundational course built around real campaign workflows, the Academy brings together practical training with real-world tools. Visit adproacademy.com.au. That's adproacademy.com.au to explore what's available and access resources built for the industry. Thank you.
Had insight to how we might be able to do things. So I could be talking to the creatives from the very beginning about how feasible something they were thinking about doing was from a budgetary point of view, or from a logistics point of view, or from a time frame point of view. I saw plenty of great ideas that came through that just were never ever going to get made in the time that we had to make them, for instance. So I think that was really interesting. But also that you're still a conduit for bringing people together. Like, I think the great EPs, and who knows, I'd never worked in an agency until I went into one as an EP, but I found that kind of bringing the different departments and making sure that everyone was talking together early on in the job and the process really beneficial and really interesting to me. Like, that was something I really, really loved. What I didn't love so much was how much work didn't get made, and how it was hard for me. I probably drove some production company producers absolutely crazy by giving them suggestions on how they could do things. So being that one step removed from the actual process, I found a little bit challenging, particularly on set.
What you've just said there, it almost sounds like there needs to be some sort of avenue for agency producers to be able to step out into or get an insight into the production company world per se. It would probably make their role. It'd probably elevate their role, or give them tools that they wouldn't necessarily know by just being an agency producer.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely, for sure. There's just the kind of process of how something gets pulled together, I think would be a really interesting thing for them to watch. But they do have to have different skills, as well. And I would not want to. There's a lot that production company producers and EPs can learn from agencies. And I think one of the things that really kind of struck me was, and something I talk to directors about all the time now, is when we get a script from an agency and they start wanting to change all the things, and we've got to change this voiceover and that scene's not going to work. Like, that agency might have done 67 versions of that script before it came to us. They probably know that wasn't where they wanted to land it, but we have to be respectful that there was a process. So that's a question I often ask right up front now. Like, how long did it take you to get to here? What are the absolutely non-negotiables in this script? If a director wants to add something, where are the places they can really do this, and how open are you to us bringing some new ideas to the table? Because if they have spent 6 months trying to get something approved, the last thing they want is for some upstart production company and director to come along and rewrite it for them. So that was a big learning to me, because in the past I would have said to directors, you just go for it. If you want to change it, just change it. Doesn't matter. I wouldn't do that now. I would have the conversation with the agency before I did that. And
before you mentioned skills, you said that they have a particular set of skills, agency producers. Can you elaborate on what they are?
Yeah, look, when I first went into an agency, I didn't know how to like I wasn't kind of up to date on doing talent rollovers every 12 months, for instance. Do you know what I mean? Like I do the job, give all the paperwork to the agency, and then I forget about it. So I think that there's a kind of paperwork that sounds so boring, and I don't mean it to be, but there's like a paperwork and a compliance part of being an agency producer that's really important, I think. I think they're building like great producers. I've noticed great agency producers have really great relationships with their clients as well. And I think I had always been kind of a step removed from that. And I think building those coalitions is a skill that they have that not all production company producers have, because they can often be more organizational, you know. So I think those things, and I think just they have that insight into how an agency works and what needs to get done to get a job through the door, you know, and they have great contacts, you know, they know who to call for things. I think they're all really important skills. But I think that kind of nitty gritty stuff about the paperwork and the so boring, and I don't mean it to be, but like just all those
I've
things
been
are
there.
really important.
Victoria, I've been there, so I know what it's like. And yes, it's tedious. It can be, and it's a big part of your remit. So, but again, it's some people just love it, and it's a part of the job. So you've got to get used to it. And
and I think that also like just knowing, you know, like I didn't have a massive idea about stills usage, for instance. Like I'd never really had to deal with stills usage until I went into an agency. So, you know, I had to ask people how that worked when I first started. You know, and it's the same. I mean, I was pretty okay with voiceovers, but, you know, getting your little rate card out and working out how much everything's going to cost. Making sure you don't forget anything. You know, I think now production companies are doing more CAD and dispatch and those things. We do all of that here at ETB, but I hadn't done really any of that before I went to an agency. So I think there's this massive part of compliance and finishing things off and ticking lots of boxes that I didn't have to do before I went into an agency.
Or jobs, particular types of jobs. You can't help but just have favourites, and that's not a bad thing. It's just things that you really enjoy. I love outdoors work. I just love it. Are there any projects for yourself that you really take a shining to?
I have done a lot of car commercials. Like I think there was a kind of 18-month period in my career where I pretty much exclusively did cars. And I loved it. I really, really loved it. Now it's just one of the strings in my bow, I think. I still think they're great shoots and they're high stakes, and that's always exciting. But I think now I love the idea of the creative process more than I am excited about a particular kind of shooting. Like now we just did a little hamburger shoot the other day, which was tiny, like so tiny. But it was great fun. Everyone got into it. It came out exactly how we wanted it. There was no, it was just a great, nice day. So now I'm up for that as much as I am for like getting up at 3:00 in the morning and parking the trucks and, you know, all of that.
I can think about it from a business owner, and if I had a production company, you'd want those jobs where people are having fun all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what you'd want to be a part of, and that's what you want to foster.
Yeah, I want the team to walk away at the end of the day proud of what they've done, regardless of what that job is. Like I want them to feel like they've made a difference and they've elevated something, and whether that is the tiny little food shoot or whether it is a giant car job, like I want everyone to feel part of the team.
And giant car jobs, we've been fortunate. I've had a couple of people on just recently talking about car commercials. What are the intricacies or the things that you've really got to be aware of when you are shooting car commercials?
I think car commercials are the one that I can't think of any other just category where you need to be absolutely so stitched down about every part of what you're doing. From the time of day that you're shooting to your permits, to your safety, because it is high stakes. It costs a lot of money it can cost a lot of money to put a car on a road with a Russian arm and, a drone overhead and everything else that you need or want. So there's just a lot. I think it has more kind of checks and balances that need to be, that like those lists are going full time when you're on a car commercial. You're ticking off a lot of stuff and you're bringing together a lot of different departments, you know, like camera and gripping are talking all the time. You know, you're involved with the police and the safety officers and everyone. There's a lot of moving parts to do really exciting stuff. And I think if you get there and it's all running and nothing's going wrong and no one's screaming at you on the radio, there's a massive sense of achievement because you've probably brought together a lot of people to make this happen.
Give me a story where you've had to really be on your game as a producer with regards to management of teams or management of a particular crisis that may have arisen.
Yeah. I think the first time I shot in China, which was a car commercial, and it's a very just different work ethic for, you know, and they were shooting like 18, 19 hours a day, and we turned up to do some tracking vehicle work, and there was no safety harness for the DOP on the back of the vehicle. He was just like basically on an office chair tied to a pole it was not great. And I was actually having an actual heart attack, and this DOP was not a small guy. And I was like, this is just like so terrible. And then, but the police came and they were like, no. And they tied him on. And I was like, are you all right up there, Tim? And he was like clearly just white, just going, this is like, I'm going to be dead. Anyway, so then they went off with the police, and they came back and there were no police. And I was like, what happened to the police? And they said, oh, they got bored and they went. I was like, this is just so terrible. We were all exhausted. Like I was exhausted. The director and DOP were exhausted because we're just working these massive, ridiculous hours. Anyway, we came back. It was a great commercial. People loved it. So much so that they asked us back. And I was like, oh my God. So I went back that time with some rules where I said, look, we're happy to come back, but, you know, the director and the DOP will have 8 hours at their hotel every day. So look, no one got hurt. I learned a lot about just that my responsibility was to the crew that I took over, which were the director and the DOP. And regardless of how they worked in that country, I don't think it was acceptable for them to not to work those crazy hours and to not be treated like with some kind of safety respect. So that was kind of a big, a learning for me that I had to stand up on their behalf, really. I think we all got sick because we were so exhausted, but we all survived. And then I've had some other shoots that were just really hard. I had one where a director and the first AD got into a fight on the first day of the shoot and then didn't speak for the next 4 days of the shoot. And I was driving them to set every day. And they would get in the car and say, hi, Victoria, and then not speak to each other for like half an hour while we drove into the countryside. And that made everything very challenging, I think. But that was just driven by a director who didn't have a lot of respect for anyone.
What's the trick to staying calm when everything is, falling apart?
This is so boring, but I'm like a massive proponent of mindfulness and meditation. So like for me, I would just breathe for a minute and just like take a second. And then you just leap into action. And you've got to, if you're the senior person on set, you have to realize that everyone is going to be looking to you for a solution. So you have to be prepared to take on that responsibility. And I think that's something, you just bring up that, paths to production have changed. There's a lot of people producing now who, by the time I got to producing, I'd been in the industry for a few years. I'd been on heaps and heaps of film sets. I'd seen other producers work. I had a pretty good idea. I had great backup because I was in a full-time job. But I do worry sometimes about young people who are on set in what could be a challenging situation or a dangerous situation, and they don't have those skills or that experience to know that something could go wrong, and you are responsible for everyone. But B, how do you react in that situation? Like you have to be the person who is cool and calm and collected in the moment, even if then, and I have done this, you go off behind the makeup truck and have a little cry once it's all sorted.
So what about new people that are coming in, particularly producers? Like you said, there's so many pathways now, a lot of people doing it. What advice do you have for those people coming through who want to start out, either production company or agency brand land?
I would find mentors for sure. You know, even if you're at a stage where you're an early career producer and you're actually producing things, find a mentor, someone who's done it before, who you can ask questions for. Like, I don't think I'd go through a week without having to ask someone else a question because something's changed or I don't know something or
Even after 30 years.
I just don't think I know everything. You know, like there's always something different or I haven't done something for a while and maybe it's changed I think if you can find a couple of people in this industry that you respect and who can give you some time and that you can have on speed dial when you've got a question, I think that is hugely important because I do worry that sometimes in production, you just don't know what you don't know. And I definitely, when I was an agency producer and sometimes we would work with someone new and then I would find out they didn't have a permit for something and then I would go, well, you need to get a permit for that. Like I'm not having my creatives on set if there's no permit for that, But sometimes it was just they didn't know or they didn't know who to ask and it's a shame there's no kind of handbook for producing. I think the best way is to find a couple of people who have the career that you want to have and ask if they would be your mentor.
And it's great to hear from yourself, even after 30 years, that you still ask questions. I think that's something that may be lost on a lot of people, that no matter how far along you are, sometimes you forget, sometimes there's things you haven't touched for a while, and it's repetition. If you haven't been doing it for a while, there's just things that fall away. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And also, if you've got questions, people are probably going to ask the same question you are.
That's right. There are no wrong questions. There are no stupid questions. Even if you don't want to say it out loud in front of, I think most producers must have been here, when you're standing on a recce. And look, for me, when I was younger, I would inevitably be the only woman on the recce. And there'd be like 10 guys and we would have just all got out of the minibus and someone is saying something. And I think, no idea what they're actually talking about. Like, I don't know what they're talking about. And then I would have to sidle up to the person I trust the most in that crew group and say, can you just talk me through what we're doing, because they might be talking about some new piece of equipment that I haven't used before, or they've had this happens a lot, they've had a side conversation about how they're going to do something that you haven't been part of. You can't just let that stuff go because at some point it will come back to bite you when something is happening on set that you didn't know about. So you've got to keep your ears open for sure. And then find the people that you trust the most to ask the question. But there aren't any silly questions. It's the same way if anything looks out of focus on the monitor, say something because it probably is.
Tell us about Eric, Tom and Bruce. This is your company.
So, I was obviously with the producers for a long time and partners with Tanya and Noel. Way back in 2019, we started Eric, Tom and Bruce really because we were getting a lot of scripts that were hard to produce with the budgets that they had in a traditional production company model. Budgets were definitely getting tighter and we were like, okay, there's a future here for people to work at this budget level, which I kind of call under $100,000. So anywhere at ETB, we probably work between 15 and 100, depending on what the job is. They're the kind of jobs that come into us. But a kind of old, an established model of a freelance director and then all freelance crew and producers on fees is very hard to maintain, and have money left to actually produce the job and for everyone to be paid fairly. Mm-hmm. So after a lot of thinking, I kind of came back to them with this idea that we would have a separate company that had more, even though it sounds counterintuitive, more full-time staff, because those staff then work across a whole range of jobs at any one time. And so that's been the model. And we've kind of tweaked it around the edges. And then last year, we separated the businesses. So I've taken on ETB. Tanya and Noel have kept the producers. It's all super amicable. But ETB was getting to a point where it kind of needed to come out from under the shadows and be able to talk to all sorts of clients as its own thing, which we've been doing, and that's so great. So we have a mix of clients. We do a lot of not-for-profit work. And we've got a not-for-profit team that are really great at that. And then we work traditionally with agencies. And then we also work quite a lot with in-house creative departments.
Hey, Victoria, it's been an absolute pleasure. I thank you so much. A great chat with you. Thanks for opening up. Thanks for sharing. Good luck with everything. I'm sure you will have tremendous success personally, but also with ETB. So thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for having me, Brenton.
Well, that's it for today on Make the Logo Bigger. Thanks for hanging out with us. We've shared some insights and stories that I hope you found useful. Whether you're just getting started or diving deeper into ad production, there's always more to explore. Keep listening, stay curious, and we'll be back soon with some more from the world of production. Take care until then.